everybody. My name is Renee. I'm the co-author of the new book, The Tithing Hoax, Exposing the Lies, Misinterpretations, and False Teachings About Tithing. And today I'm going to conduct a brief teaching on the topic of tithing. And the purpose of this particular teaching is, number one, to provide a brief overview of the book, The Tithing Hoax, and the topic of tithing. Number two, to answer 3 of the most common questions people have about tithing. Number 3, to expose and correct a few of the common false teachings about tithing. Number 4, to provide relief to Christians who feel they must choose between paying tithes and paying their household expenses. And number 5, to provide a peace of mind for Christians who believe they are, quote-unquote, robbing God, or that they won't be blessed because they're not tithing. And the content of this particular teaching is based on the book, The Tithing Hoax. So for further study and information about the topic of tithing, I do encourage you to get your copy of The Tithing Hoax. Now, before I get into the teaching, you may want to get you a piece of paper, a pen or pencil, and if you have the Tithing Hoax, grab your book. But if you don't have a copy of the Tithing Hoax, you may want to grab your Bible, because I cite several scriptures, and the scriptures I cite are the same scriptures that are in the Tithing Hoax that I mentioned here in this teaching. And just as a point of reference, the scriptures that are mentioned here and in the Tithing Hoax come from the King James Version of the Bible. But if you don't have the King James Version of the Bible, that's okay. Any version of the Bible that you have should be suitable for following along with this particular teaching. So, let's get started. What are the 3 common questions that people have about tithing? Number 1, what was the tithe? Number 2, who was commanded to tithe? And 3, why were they commanded to tithe? And of course, I'm going to start with question number 1, what was the tithe? Now, many preachers preach and teach that the tithe or tithing involves giving 10% of your income, whether it be your net income or your gross income. So people in the church associate tithe or tithing with money. However, when we study the Bible, we learn that tithe or tithing doesn't have anything to do with one's income, and is not related to, or it does not make any reference to money. So let's first look at the word tithe in and of itself. Now, the literal meaning of the word tithe is 10%, a tenth, 1 or 1/10. So when the preachers make mention of 10%, that the tithe is 10%, they are correct on that. They got that part right. However, when it comes to talking about giving 10% of your income or giving money in the forms of tithes, they aren't correct, because the Bible does not support that particular teaching or that particular belief. So when the Bible is making reference to the tithe and tithing, yes, it's talking about 10%, but it's talking about 10% of agricultural produce and cattle, not money, not income. And just to provide biblical proof of that, I'm going to go to the Tithing Hoax, and I'm going to turn the channel. I'm going to turn to page 29. And if you have your Bible, you can go to Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 23. And here's what it says. It says, "And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, the tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, and of thine oil, and the firstlings of thy herds and of thy flocks." So, in this one verse alone, we see that in reference to the tithe, it's talking about agricultural produce. It's talking about cattle. Here, it mentions corn. It mentions wine. It mentions oil, herds, and flock. And notice where it says, and thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God. This verse is making reference to the eating of the tithe. So, obviously, the tithe is not money because you don't eat money. You eat food. You drink. So the tithe, the biblical tithe, is really in reference to 10% of food, drink, and cattle. Now, if you want other scriptural references, I will share those with you. I'm not going to read them, but you can write them down and you can go and read them for yourself. You can go to Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30. Also Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 22. And also 2 Chronicles chapter 31, verse 6. And those give you references to tithing as a form of giving 10% of agricultural produce and of animals. Okay?